In college, I took a philosophy class. It was a whole semester spent just on different philosophies about love. I've been thinking about that class a lot lately. We don't typically celebrate Valentine's Day at my house because it coincides with a family member's birthday, so we've always just made it like a birthday celebration instead of a Valentine's Day thing. But this year I've just been really leaning into Valentine's Day, celebrating love in all of its forms. And I wanted to just keep that theme going today by talking about movies about love that I've collected over the years. Now, like most of my collection videos, these DVDs were collected between, let's say, 2004 and 2016. Which I think was, especially the early 2000s, a time that was historically pretty focused on telling stories about like white people in mainstream media. So a lot of these movies, almost all of them really, are about white straight couples. As I've gotten older, I've definitely sought out stories other than these very particular stories. But I wasn't buying DVDs when I started finding those kinds of movies because physical media like that was not really necessary anymore. So, all that to say, this binder's a little bit of a time capsule. That was a long intro, but let's get into the binder. I think that's a really nice sound. Okay, starting off strong with a genre that people either love or hate. Totally fair, whatever your opinion is. But the 50 Shades of Grey series. 50 Shades of Grey, 50 Shades Darker, and 50 Shades Freed. Now, these books came out when I was in college. And I was living in a house with 6 girls. And we were just kind of passing the books around because they were so not like anything else that we'd ever read before. And it became like a communal, like a shared experience among my housemates. And for that reason alone, these stories are incredibly nostalgic to me. It's such a time and a place. And then when the movies came out, I was out of school and I had made some new friends in my new city, at my new job, and we had like girls' nights out where we would go out to the premieres of these. The experiences that surround both the books and the movies for me remind me of really beautiful times in my life. I have to say that I think the third movie, 50 Shades of Freed, is my favorite movie of the 3 because it has a bit more action built into it. That's all that I'll say about the 50 Shades movies. I thought that the 50 Shades series was going to be like the most embarrassing thing on the list here, but friends. The books were bestsellers. I read the books with one of my best friends in high school. And again, a very communal experience. I'm sure pretty much everybody knows that 50 Shades of Grey was Twilight fan fiction, and the names were just changed when she published. So it would make sense that I have both of these series in my collection. They're kind of two sides of the same coin. Now, a hot take. Team Edward or Team Jacob. In high school, I was very much Team Edward. Are you kidding me? But as I've gotten older, I really appreciate the warmth and stability that Jacob brings. So as an adult now, I think I fall more on Team Jacob than I do on Team Edward. Please, if you are a Twilight fan, I'd love to know Team Edward or Team Jacob in the comments. Go ahead and let me know. And did your opinion change over time? In high school, I feel like reading books about true love was really fun because I'd never experienced it, so it was beautiful to read about. Girl, none of this is what it's like in real life. It is sure fun to read about, though. We love the fantasy of it all. Moving on. The Before Sunrise trilogy, which is Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight, which is on the next page here, I believe is the greatest trilogy ever made about love. If you've never heard of these movies, the first movie is about these two characters who meet on a train, and they decide to get off at this stop together and just walk around all night before he has to catch a flight back to the US. And they're just walking around these gorgeous European cities. Just walking and talking, that's the entire movie. One of the most accurate depictions of getting to know a person. But it's bound in time because they just have this one night together, so it's a little bit expedited. The first movie is about the night that they spend together. The second movie is many, many years later. And they reconnect. This movie is again walking and talking through a city in Europe. But they're kind of talking about the way that their lives have panned out and how they feel about their lives. And then the last movie, Before Midnight, is truly, I think, what it means to be in a relationship, in a partnership with a person. I feel like I'm not spoiling anything in those descriptions. But this came out in 2004. So hopefully I have not spoiled anything. However, I saw an interview that the filmmakers had done. I think it was the director maybe, or maybe it was just someone doing if you ever watch these, I think you'll understand what they mean by that, and it's really beautiful. I could spend a lot of time talking about the Before Sunrise trilogy, but I guess I would just say, if you have some time, I'd recommend giving those ones a watch. The next movie here is The Last Song, which I think came out when I was in college, if I'm remembering right. As a Disney Channel kid, grew up watching DComs, the original movies, and Hannah Montana, and all the things. This was like Miley Cyrus's big switch into serious acting. But what's interesting about this movie is that Nicholas Sparks wrote it as a movie and then wrote the book, or came out with the book after the movie. So as opposed to a movie that was made based off of a book, this one was written by a famous author to be a movie, which I thought was kind of an interesting piece of the lore. If you like Nicholas Sparks and his stories, crippling gut punch of grief mixed with the beauty and innocence of first love, then you'll love this movie. On to the next. Oh, okay, we've got another Nicholas Sparks. Two more Nicholas Sparks. You know, he really had a chokehold on the romance industry in the 2010s. And if you know, you know. If you were there, it was like a movie a year, and they were all huge hits. Dear John, Channing Tatum, Amanda Seyfried. What would you do with the letter that changed everything? Dear John, I remember seeing with my roommates in college in the theater. So again, an element of nostalgia and like memory attached. I think I've maybe rewatched that once. The thing that I'm remembering the most was his relationship with his dad in the movie. So, I have nothing else to say. The Vow, another Channing Tatum movie. This time with Rachel McAdams, another Nicholas Sparks favorite. And this is about, it's based on a true story, apparently, about a couple who were in a car accident and the wife lost her memory of their entire relationship. And it's about him trying to basically woo her all over again. The central conflict, though, is that she basically lost her memory back to a point where she was kind of a different person, and she doesn't really understand why she ended up with him. And I think that makes for a pretty compelling story, especially the fact that it was inspired by true events. Life is so weird, you know? Next up, we've got Don John with Julianne Moore, Scarlett Johansson, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. In this movie, Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays a guy Justin Long, Evan Rachel Wood, Peter Dinklage, and Brendan Fraser. Looks like this one came out in 2013, and it was an indie movie. Young writer Sam has a crush on Birdie, the cute and quirky barista at his local coffee shop, so it's giving manic pixie dream girl energy. When his conventional attempts to woo her crash and burn, he takes his efforts online, creating an internet profile embellished with all of the details that would make him Birdie's dream guy, and she falls for him basically. It's called A Fresh Take on Romance in the Digital Age. I haven't seen this in a while. I should rewatch it. But I think that's something that a lot of us can relate to. We have so much access to information about people that we don't really know very well. And it's easy to try and customize yourself for someone. But if you're making up who you are, did they really fall in love with you? The thing. So I thought it was interesting. I really like Evan Rachel Wood and Justin Long and Peter Dinklage and Brendan Fraser. So all-star cast for me. I should give this one a rewatch. Now we've got Endless Love. It's a remake of an 80s movie, I think. Classic, like, privileged rich girl. He's maybe a boy from the wrong side of the tracks. Star-crossed lovers kind of thing. And I don't remember this movie at all. There was a video store that I used to shop at a lot, and sometimes they'd have super cheap movies to buy that you couldn't rent, and I would just blind buy movies that I thought looked interesting, either from the cover or the description on the back. And I ended up with a lot of movies that I maybe didn't love, or maybe only watched once or twice, and then they just kind of stayed in my collection. And this is one of those. Now we've got Teenage Dirtbag, also inspired by true events. This one was an indie movie. I don't know that it had a theatrical release. This is another popular girl falls for the bad boy. So if that's your genre, you might like it. It has the guy who played... Oh, I'm not going to be able to remember his name. He was in that TV show on like the CW about fraternities and sororities. I'm being super helpful here. His name is Scott Michael Foster. I didn't watch that TV show, but he was also on a TV show called The River that only had one season before it got canceled, but I remember thinking I thought he was an interesting actor, and I was looking up some other stuff that he'd been in, and I think that's why I picked this movie up. It tells the story of a popular high school cheerleader who is harassed by a delinquent classmate until they're both placed in the same creative writing class. Through written words, they develop a fragile bond of trust, companionship, and love. But is it a bond that can withstand her elitist social pressures and his brutal home life? Tagline here is, "Death is fleeting, love is forever." Okay. Just Married, Ashton romance. She lives with her older brother Benny, who spent his life taking care of her since their parents died. One night, while playing a poker game with unusual stakes, June loses her hand and wins Sam, a whimsical misfit who soon charms his way into June's heart. Now, if they can only find the perfect mate for her overprotective brother. This movie was filmed in Washington State, and as such, most people in the state are familiar with it and have like cool memories attached to it. So I think I found this in high school, this movie, and I pretty much watched it once a year at least for many, many years. To me, when winter is ending and I feel that spring is starting, I have this urge to watch Benny and June. So I love this movie. Garden State, another Manic Pixie Dream Girl classic about an emotionally stunted man-child and a girl that is way too cool and unique. And I love Garden State. I don't know what that says about me as a person. The soundtrack to this movie I am also obsessed with. I bought the soundtrack like on CD after I saw this movie. And something about this one just hit me right in the soul and never left. I know that Manic Pixie Dream Girl movies are kind of problematic, but I really love them. I love that genre, so. Okay, now, A Life Less Ordinary is a movie about the role of fate and destiny in romance. In this movie, basically, angels act as Cupid to make sure that certain couples fall in love. And this is just one, an odd couple, kind of like they make no sense together, and yet somehow fate has decided that they're supposed to be together, so these angels have to set up circumstances to allow for them to fall in love. It's a very strange movie. It is from the filmmakers who made Trainspotting, but there's something about this movie that I really like. I can't explain it. It's just weird. They call it a madcap romance. Cameron Diaz and Ewan McGregor. And it's a romp. If you're looking for something kind of unique, I'd recommend giving A Life Less Ordinary a try. The soundtrack is also incredible for this movie. 2 movies with soundtracks that I adore right here. Next up is The Girl Next Door, which I truly think is one of my favorite romantic comedies. Alicia Cuthbert and Emile Hirsch star in this one, and she plays a porn star who's trying to leave the industry, and she goes to stay at her aunt's house, and she meets this kid who's a bit nerdy and about to graduate high school. The whole thing is a little bit about what they can learn from each other, but it also has like a B plot of her former producer is really mad that she left the industry, and he's really mad that this kid is trying to talk her out of coming back. And although it's probably not the most nuanced discussion around sex work, it is just a fun movie to watch, and you love. And that made all of the things that happened in the movie a little bit more believable. So it's just a fun movie. 40 Days and 40 Nights. Josh Hartnett and Shannon Sosaman, I think is how you say it. I love her, first of all. She's in another movie that I don't have on DVD called Wrist Cutters, A Love Story. Which sounds really weird, but it's a beautiful movie, and she's one of the leads in that, and that is one of my favorite movies. This movie, I think, is probably problematic. I don't know, it's about a guy who decides that he's not gonna have sex for 40 days and 40 nights, and then he meets the girl of his dreams, and that gets really hard to stick with. I haven't watched it in a really long time. Maybe give this one a watch if you just want to see how unhinged we all were in the early 2000s, you know? Moulin Rouge. Classic. I loosely participated in the arts in high school, whether that was theater or choir. I was just always interested in the arts, and as such, I think it's a requirement that you be obsessed with Moulin Rouge. And so I was. Beautiful Baz Luhrmann movie. Visually gorgeous. The songs are cool because they're covers of a bunch of popular songs. So, while I'm not generally the biggest musical theater fan, I really like this one because it was songs that I knew. And that's all I'll say about that. Because this is the movie that I really want to talk about like crazy. I only found this out very recently, but this movie was all done like improv style. They had a loose idea of the script, you know, like here's the sequence of events, and then there was no dialogue for most scenes, is what I understand. And not knowing that for the first 10 years I was watching this movie, knowing it and then rewatching it, it just makes me appreciate it even more. This is a movie about a college TA, teaching assistant, and a student who meet in this class that he's a TA for. And they end up falling in love before she graduates. And at the end of her stint in school, her visa expires because she's from the UK, I think. And he lives in the United States. That's where they met. And her visa runs out, and she overstays her visa in the US. And then she's deported from the United States. And the movie is about navigating love when the systems that you're part of are trying to keep you apart. It's a beautiful movie about the fact that love is not the only thing required to make a relationship work. It's a key part of it, but there's so much more to a relationship than just love. And two absolutely wonderful actors, Felicity Jones and Anton Yelchin. The way that this movie ends, I think about constantly. And if you only watch one movie from this entire flip through, I'd suggest that it be this one. I really do. It's perfect. So, like crazy. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. An absolutely wonderful movie. I don't know if wonderful is the right word. Provocative. sometimes made it seem like I also was falling in love with my now husband at the time that I was taking that class. So I had this very weird experience of experiencing in real life, in real time, this thing that I was learning about in a philosophical way, disconnecting just pure feelings that I was experiencing and using my logical brain to assess it through this lens of different philosophies on love. The whole thing was so weird, and I'm so grateful for that experience because I think that it gave me a level of gratitude throughout the entire relationship with my husband, because I had this framework that I was looking at it through. I don't know if any of this makes sense, but this movie's really important to me because of all of that context, the time in which I found it, or I saw it, what I was experiencing in my real life. It's about a couple who break up. Instead of dealing with and processing the emotions of that breakup, the girl gets her memory of the entire relationship erased. He runs into her and she doesn't know this man at all, and he's so confused that he starts doing some digging and he finds out that she's done this. She's had her memories removed, and he decides to have them removed as well. And during the procedure of having his memories of their relationship erased, he realizes that he doesn't want to have those memories erased, because even if their relationship fell apart, to lose the memories of having loved this person, it's a horrible thing to happen. So I'll just leave it there, food for thought. The theory that it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. That's what this movie is exploring. I love it. Romeo and Juliet, the one with Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes, featuring music by Radiohead. Another Baz Luhrmann movie, I think, right? Yeah. Visionary director of Moulin Rouge. It's beautiful to watch. It's a classic story about doomed love. And that's all I've got to say. This is going to be the last movie in our collection today. Or the last two movies, I should say. The first is Reality Bites with Winona Ryder, Ethan Hawke, and Ben Stiller. It says 2004. I thought it was older than that. Maybe not. Oh, it's the 10th anniversary edition, so it must have come out in like 1994. I haven't rewatched it recently, so I guess I don't know if it stands up. But if you're looking for a classic 90s rom-com, I would recommend Reality Bites. The last movie that I want to talk about came out when I was in college. Again, when I was falling in love with my now husband. And this movie literally makes me feel like I'm falling in love every time I rewatch it. It's about a zombie and a human girl. He should be eating her brains, but instead he falls in love with her, and through the act of falling in love, he begins to change. The soundtrack for this movie is incredible. So good. And just the message of the movie. I think the tagline is "Love is the cure," and I really do feel that way. think this is a great movie to end on because, kind of back to where I started with this video, I'm in a moment in time where I'm really leaning into love. And I just wish that everyone could make decisions from a place of love as opposed to a place of trying to gain like power or dominance over other people. This movie explores a world in which love can overcome all things, and that's a theme that I want to be true so badly that I just keep watching that story, I guess. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this flip through. I hope you enjoyed the tippy-tappy sounds and the whispered rambles about some movies that I've collected over the years. I feel like there are so many newer movies that represent love in the way that I'm interested in seeing or really intrigued or challenged by. And that makes me happy because I think for a long time, the same stories were told over and over again. And I am always curious